a lot of plans. And
okay, 3:30. Let's start. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another webinar by the Destination Knowledge Center. Today is Monday, and Monday we have the itinerary of the week. And today we are focusing on rural Rajasthan. We have circulated this itinerary a couple of weeks back. Gitanjali Rajpal from Ramatra Fort was supposed to join us, but she couldn't because of some problems back home. But on the panel, we have today Smriti Mandawa from Johad Vaidera Mandawa. We have Manoj Pamneja, Vice President, Incentives and Groups, Distant Frontiers. And we have Annu Dhilo from Chambal Safari Lodge, who will give us interesting insights and nuggets as we kind of travel on this itinerary. So I'm going to turn off my video now. This is the itinerary. Delhi, Johad Vaidera Mandawa, Samud Palace, Bharatpur, Chambal Safari Lodge, and back to Delhi. I would like some opening remarks here. I mean, big crowds and plenty of sightseeing attractions are among the qualities that gives big cities of a destination their edge. But there are now talks in the travel fraternity that post-COVID-19, travelers are likely to become wary of crowded urban centers and instead seek out less crowded but vibrant second-tier towns, cities, and natural areas which are not too far away from the main sites. It is interesting though to know that even before the pandemic struck, a report by Expedia.com in 2018 noted an increased interest in unique and novel experiences, the rise of secondary cities, and an increased demand in non-traditional lodging in what it says is a desire to experience a destination in new and different ways. These findings also dovetail with the trend of sustainable tourism, where travelers can have transformative experiences while also feeling rest assured that their enjoyment doesn't come at the expenses of damaging fragile ecosystems or threatening the livelihood of local communities. And long before COVID-19 hit, the phenomena of slow travel was gaining speed. Now, after several months of limited mobility, lockdown, customers have an insight into slower pace of life and are most likely to reconsider their style of travel. But it is clear that when travelers comes back, slow, sustainable travel will be the norm, not the exception, with customers traveling with a newfound gratitude and appreciation. I would like to have some opening remarks here. I would like to start with Smriti Mandawa, then Manoj Pamneja, and finally Annu Dhilo. Over to you, Smriti.
thank you, Kuntil. Thank you so much. Namaste. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I'll pick it up from where Kuntil actually said that it's they're looking for something different. The travelers and the Expedia report that I'm referring to is unique and novel experiences. In my opinion, I think the report lacks a bit of depth. And the reason why I would say that is it's not something that is new that the travelers are looking for, in my opinion. I think it's more like copy paste, like every place, every hotel, every destination, every experiences are being like copy pasted. The uniqueness and the depth or the character of the place, the people, the culture, the traditions, the vibe is just being lost in that process. And now eventually people are getting a bit tired of having the same experience everywhere they go. And the reason for the unique and new experience, novel experiences, I would say it's more about the depth that the experiences that are being designed that was lacking from it. So it's a good news. It's a good thing that we've reached that saturation level, and we should together as people should move together in a more in-depth and more true to its character and true to the place that we are at or the people. The experience should be designed around that. So that would be my input or my opinion in that space.
Manoj?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Kuntil and the TKC team for the invitation to this webinar, which I think is about the three of the most discussed words in our industry as of today, which are tourism, rural, and sustainable. This is what everybody wants now. This is, in the post-COVID, this is going to be the new normal. So I'm sure we'll all take away something to improve our outlook on the business, how to move forward from this webinar today. Thank you once again, and back to Kuntil or Anu.
Anu, over to you. Your opening remarks. Anu?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Anu, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, and it's wonderful to be here and connecting, even though it's virtually after so many months of being in isolation. What I would say to sustainable is, my only concern with this whole sustainability dialogue is that we tend to go overboard and without really understanding the concept.
Right.
And along with when you say that we need to be traveling slower, I think we also need to be looking at carrying capacities for different places, especially fragile habitats and ecosystems. Most places get destroyed through overexposure. And I'm on board with Smriti when she says that, it's like the same experience being done and overdone and redone, and to the point where everything merges into one. The uniqueness of each experience is only there if there are fewer travelers at a point where they have longer time, and we figure out what the carrying capacity for each location is and then plan accordingly. We increase the space into which people travel, as in the geographical dimensions, rather than restricting them to those little, what is the Golden Triangle or just Rajasthan or just Varanasi and Taj Mahal. It needs to go further, it needs to go into the hinterland, but it needs to be very carefully thought through to make sure that we have the right numbers going in and not over-exploiting the resource. I think that's pretty much what I feel fairly strongly about. Over to you, Kuntil.
Right, let's start it then. Thank you for your initial comments. Okay, here I have some pictures here, and I'll ask the panelists questions about it. The camel, which is so much associated. I mean, anything you do about Rajasthan, it's camel, which is called a ship of the desert. Over to Smriti, I would like to ask you, 80% of India's one-hump camel is in Rajasthan, but over the last couple of decades, the demand for male camels as work animals has steadily declined, taking away the traditional economic rationale for camel breeding and leading to a dramatic dip in the camel population. Though globally the camel population is increasing, in India it is experiencing a dramatic decline in India. Is the camel still relevant in rural Rajasthan?
There are many things wrapped up in what you just said, actually, Kuntil.
Yeah.
So yeah, globally, the population is increasing of camels because of various reasons. And there is a certain camel farm culture which has come into play, which are there in the Middle East. Camel meat is eaten in some countries. There are camels infestation without any use happening in Australia. So there are various reasons why that population globally is increasing. In India, that is not the case. In India, camel has been a part of our lives for centuries and centuries. And it was almost every farmer's best friend or best man or best confidant and supporter in everything that a farmer did. And now, of course, in India, the little bit of support, current state, the little bit of support that we have of in the camel space is primarily because the BSF uses a large part of its forces at the border of Rajasthan and Gujarat. They use camel as a mode of manning that part of the border. And it is because that terrain, nothing else suits that terrain than to patrol it on camels. And besides that, yes, you're right that the population of camels has dropped drastically. I can even see it. We've observed it ourselves, even here at our villages. Every household had at least one or two, and now probably there is one in every 20 households. So that is how much it has dropped, that percentage. Now, why it has dropped and is it still relevant, to answer that question? Yes, it's absolutely very much relevant. And that is exactly what we are trying to do at Johor, is to be able to create a model and a system where we are able to create models of such practices and such systems where it is very visible the relevance and the balance of the whole ecosystem of what supports everything and how everything is related. It is relevant in terms of, I'll just give you a small example. I'll use examples for relevance, is that when you farm, when you plow the field with a tractor or any equipment like that, and when you plow the field with a camel plow, and there is or for that matter, in different parts of the country, even bullocks were used. It's the same concept there, is that you actually just till the land at the topsoil level. So you don't lose the moisture content. When you use a tractor, you're actually just opening up the earth up to 10 inches, 8 inches, sometimes even a foot, which in results into losing of the moisture content of the soil, the microorganisms in the soil, and the entire system which keeps the plant life or the crop life healthy. You're exposing it, letting it die and dry. And then the demand of water, the pressure of water, and it's a chain effect. It's a ripple effect. It just goes on and on and on and on. So if I plow my field just the topsoil level with a plow which is drawn by an animal like a camel or a bullock, the difference is that, which is huge in the long run. Even the germination, if you put the seeds at the right level, and when it gets the right balance of the moisture and the water and the sun, the germination is also much higher. I mean, it is something that very easily can be proven. I mean, if you do it's just about uska chalan ho gaya hai, we want everything extremely fast. And it's just, it's really boiling down to, this is the trend now. And hence we are losing that connect with the ecosystem, I would say, not just the camel, with the whole biodiversity which supported the whole system to be sustainable and live by itself. And hence the camel is very much relevant, I would say, even for transport. As it can reach places where many other modes of transport can't. And it's a catch-22, because they say it now, like in terms of how will they build roads and how will they build infrastructures and how will it's unfortunate that progress is only associated to accessibility and not the quality of life and not the quality of water and not the quality of soil. I mean, it's we as a society, as a country, as people have gone in that mode of sadak hai to progress hai or unnati hai. But that's the misconception. Of course, it is a part of it, but it's not the only thing. And that is something around which we are trying to build models, and not only around the relevance of camel at Johor or any other such semi-desert, ecosystems. So,
my second question to you would be: the camel is a central character in the Johor by Dera Mandawa story. Tell us more about it.
Well, I would like to, as I said earlier, it's not I wouldn't say it's a central character. It is a very important character
Yeah.
of our life here. It's not central. And the reason why I say that is because there's not one thing that creates the whole system. The camel plays a role, the cattle plays a role, the vegetation plays a role, how we value water, how we conserve water, how we use it, that plays a role. How we farm, the whole mindset of people and the mindset of how we set up the whole system and live by it and live with it is primarily what Johor is actually all about, and the camel is definitely a very important part. So it's not the central, I would say. I mean, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, very nice. This is another thing, I find it an absolute marvel to witness the sheer ingenuity and artistry of food in rural Rajasthan. Uh, Doing more with less. Spriti, tell us more about the food which is cooked in rural Rajasthan.
Uh, as you said, Kuntil, it's more with less is quite an interesting way to look at it. Actually, food has been, and all of this is, I mean, of course, sustainability is a loosely used term in some places. In some places, this is a term that we didn't even know, our forefathers didn't even know, but that is exactly that's how they lived. In the past 100 years, it's changed dramatically and very, and we all know how that it is now today. But it is all tied together, and I might keep saying that because when you talk about food, the camel comes into the picture. When you talk about food, we are we food is what we eat, is what we grow. We are not traditionally, we haven't gone out of eating what we don't grow, and there are many cultures in many places which have practiced that. And Rajasthan very evidently has practiced that for, again, a very, very long time. For example, the amount of dishes that we have of milk products like chach or curries, what we call it, khata. We eat a lot of these beans like sogri, chavla, gwarfali, sangri, and how they're stored for winter. They dried and kachiri. I'm naming all locally grown and available, either farmed or even which grows wild. So like how kachiri is a wild berry which is a part of the cucumber family. So that is dried and stored for the rest of the year. And so are the beans, and so is and how you value it and how you eat it fresh green, and then you store it, and then you keep living by, as you said, more with less, living by with everything that you have around you in that fashion. I mean, even milk products, even mushrooms, you'll be surprised. There is a certain kind of mushroom that we eat here, which is used for when animals have any fractures or humans have any fractures. It is mixed with ghee and haldi and put on the wound, and it can also be consumed, and you can also eat it. So there are these extremely interesting and fascinating practices around food and around how you discover and you make that as a practice of your culture in your daily life, and understand it and live by it. And
Fascinating. Really
for example,
fascinating.
even the camel, I'll bring back the camel story. So how we many parts of the country also does that. How we cook on cow paddy, or the droppings, dried droppings of camels. उसके ऊपर उनको आप किसी भाषा में कंडे बोलते हैं, किसी भाषा में थेपले बोलते हैं. There are various different terms for it. And then you dry it and you cook it, and to a lot of people it's like, they're quite fascinated. Isn't that infection? But it's if you're cooking it at that heat, and if it's burning as fuel, then it is nowhere infection can come around it. So then you cook, you make your Mother Earth a natural oven by baking those batis or any kind of bread in the hearth of the koila. So it's just how you find your way around it, and then it becomes a part of the culture and how we live. and it becomes a part of your blood then.
Right. Thank you, Smriti. Anu, tell us about food cooked in rural Uttar Pradesh. How is it different from Rajasthan or similar?
I think we have a lot of similarities in terms of the milk-based products, but we're also very fortunate in that being slap bang in the Indo-Gangetic plain, we have a lot of vegetables. So, and this being the Braj area, you find that it's predominantly vegetarian. So the vegetables are cooked in numerous innovative ways, and we also do the same sort of thing. We'll eat them fresh, and then we'll keep them, pickle them, and no, there's a lot of things that are that grow wild in the ravines. The tainty, which is that wild berry, so we tend to pickle that. The karonda, but fortunately, as I said, because the farming here is fairly good and the water levels being higher, we are able to grow a lot many more vegetables. And there's the interesting things that we tend to do is with, a lot of times the vegetarian dishes that are then disguised to attempt to be a more like a meat-based one. Like, for instance, the kamal kakdi kebabs and the kathal, the jackfruit, gets cooked in numerous different ways to make it feel more like a meat dish. And all auspicious occasions, in fact, tend to be completely vegetarian in these parts. It's only later in the evening that you'll have the meat being cooked. I should imagine that we're not that far away from Rajasthan, so there's a lot of similarities in
Yeah,
the
of course.
food habits.
Yeah.
And
Like how we have even karonda even here at this part of the world.
yeah, so the
We
mirch
pickle it,
karonda,
yeah.
the mirch karonda gets cooked, and we've just had a nice little crop of that. And apparently, with all this COVID nonsense going on, karonda juice was in great demand. So we had all our friends and family writing to us, calling us up and demanding that we send consignments off to Delhi and Noida and where all. So, and I think again, it's about what you said. People being connected to the land. They understand their land. They know how much to extract from it. It's not an exploitative relationship. So the
Absolutely.
food
I think
tends to
that's the key
reflect that.
point where you say the exploitative relationship, it's not there. I think we would need to do a separate webinar on food in rural India and how it is so connected to the whole system. Okay, so we have 2 days in Delhi in this itinerary. 2 nights in Delhi actually, and I would, since it's a rural itinerary which focuses on rural Rajasthan, I would definitely recommend a trip to the Craft Museum, uh, which is a fascinating place in Delhi. If you want to know more, please go and see the webinar, Museums of Delhi 1, where Seema Srivastav has talked in detail about the Craft Museum. Another fascinating thing I would like to come to, Smriti, is the folk deities of Rajasthan. I always get fascinated by these folk deities. It was very interesting for me to know that in all manifestations, even a garbage heap is sacred. That's what I read. And as Rodi Mata, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I read it as Rodi Mata, or Mother Garbage. She is considered the creator of manure, a gift that encourages and sustains life and fertility within homes and out in the fields. So women of the family formally invite Rodi Mata to all family weddings. Um, Prior to the weddings, Rodi Mata is requested to bless the union and make it a fertile one. Smriti, tell us more about these folk deities of rural Rajasthan, the role these folk deities play in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, and that's the reason I'm smiling, because there is this. I'm sure this is a very common name, and people who heard Rajasthani names and some musicians, Manganyars and Langas, it's a very common name through them, and not only them. You must have heard it's called. Everybody calls it Kutle Khan. It's actually Kutla, and Kutla means garbage, literally. And there are names which are, of the Kutle Khan group, and there's a very senior musician called Hakim Khanji, and I asked him, his Kutla So he said that no, he said, no. I mean, there's actually just a matter of fact. He said he was falling very sick when he was a child, and he's my youngest son. He's had 5, 6, 7 sons, something on those lines. He says, so I thought if I name him Putla, then usko nazar nahi lagegi and he'll be fine. And it doesn't matter what's there in a name in any case. And he just, he just said it just as a matter of fact. So what I understood from that conversation and many other situations, referring up this puja of Kachra Puja, and some people call it Kachra Puja, some call it Rodi Puja, Rodi Mata, it all boils down to what Anu also said, is the relationship that you have with your land and with the resources and with what is available to you is of respect and not over exploitation. And only when that respect is ingrained is when you value things and you use them well. Anything that is not respected or valued is, used, and the word is also in English called used, is not appropriately. So I'll give you another example. Like, for example, there are other folk deities like Pabuji, Ramdev ji, Goga ji, and Bhumya ji. Bhumya is people lose their lives while fighting for a cause or saving some people or the people or community. So typically any animal related god is Pabuji. Like, he protects all the animals, whether they could be your cattle farms or your horses or your camels or whatever it is, anything related to animal. So it's a very interesting way to look at it, and most likely, and I've done some research on this, most likely these were local heroes who lived at one point in time and then were given a status of a demigod or a semigod. And I visited Kerala, actually, northern Kerala, once a couple of years ago, where there were plenty such traditions and practices that I came across. And in fact, even in Tamil Nadu, there is a very similar demigod like Pabuji we have in Rajasthan. So it reflects the thought process and the cultural and the understanding and the awareness and the respect and the relationship. It all centers around that of the folk deities. And of course, it is, again, like, for example, there will be a certain time of Goga Medi animal fairs and things. They're all very seasonal. So you come to August, there will be Gogaji's fair and things and activities around that. So it is very ingrained in how people have lived and what has been part of their lives, and zeroes down to valuing and having respect and a relationship that you have with everything around you, including nature and what is available to you.
Right. I mean, this is such a similar strain, because we had a similar webinar on the folk deities of Bengal. What you were saying, like, this whole oneness with nature is again so much a part of the folk deities and folk traditions of Bengal, where we had someone protecting the cows, the cattle, and it transcends religion. It is it's not just about religion. It's like followed by people respective of the religion. Very fascinating. Another thing that fascinates our clients and fascinates everybody are the turbans of Rajasthan. You talk about Rajasthan, suddenly the turbans come into our mind. They say, know the turbans of Rajasthan and you will know the community that person belongs to and its social status. Example, while the turbans of the Rajput community are made out of soft cotton known as malmal, communities such as the Rabaris wear red turbans made out of thick cotton. Smriti, tell us more about the turbans of Rajasthan, which is a very interesting topic, not only for us, but also for our clients.
I can read on your slide which says Rajasthan, the style of turban changes every 15 kilometers. There is a saying for India, actually, not only Rajasthan, which is कोस कोस पे बदले वाणी, चार कोस पे बदले पानी. And I love this saying. It's मतलब, I'm assuming I'll translate it in English for everybody if anybody didn't understand that. कोस कोस पे बदले वाणी. वाणी is language. And चार कोस पे बदले पानी. तो आज की तारीख में, in today's time, people are talking about this microclimatic situation. Conditions can also be handled, and micro environments can also be. So it's beautiful that it actually how कोस कोस पे पानी और वाणी, चार कोस पे पानी बदलता है और एक कोस पे वाणी बदलती है, is the dialect changes, and which also means that people changes. It also means the culture slightly changes. It also means the style changes, the environment changes. So it is a symbol of adaptability. It is again, it is symbol of that essence. And about the different turbans of Rajasthan and even Gujarat and even MP, many areas which are not, cannot be divided just by a line, but very similar culture in South Rajasthan and some parts of MP, and South Rajasthan and some parts of Gujarat, and Western Rajasthan, and so and so on. So the colors change, the styles change. Like if you go to Kota Bundi area, the kind of turban that they wear, they have a lot of blue in their turban. It's just that style. And the kind of turbans that they wear in extreme Western Rajasthan, the way they tie it. And it's not only the area wise, and as you said, it's also community wise. It was not only the turban, it was also the clothes. The Raika Rebari ones have a very multi-purpose, and this is something that I had a conversation with the Raika ones, and I asked him. Raika is a pastoral community. Raika Rebari is the pastoral communities of Rajasthan and Gujarat. I asked them. I said, why are your turbans so big? And as you said, they're made of thicker cotton cloth fabric. He said these are multi-purpose. We can use them as we want to, and we don't only use it as a turban. We use it as a very cushy pillow sometimes. We use it if we want some, some sort of a multi-purpose in terms of if we want to just cover ourselves sometimes, and it's a very, very long fabric, close to 9 meters or something on those lines, and thick. He says, we just use it. We just cut some part of it and use it. Big deal. We just sort of, and he was, again, as a matter of fact, and he just said that. And so that is for the Raika Rebari fabric that they use. Fabric, primarily, they use cotton only. Only on occasions, they use heavy fabrics, or different fabrics, could be georgettes, or those are only ceremonial. But besides that, the more, as they say, the more desertic situation or condition or environment that you are in, it is very, very uplifting to be wearing colorful things in contrast. And these are the various things that I have picked up along being a part of this world, and also after speaking to a lot of people, is the reason which is for the colors, and which reflects their characters, and seeing a lot of happiness and jovialness even in harsh conditions that they live in.
Like Anu, would you like to add to this?
Would be,
Anu?
Yeah, sorry. So I was saying we do have a turban wearing tradition here, which is unfortunately dying out. I see very few young people wearing them. The older generation do tend to wear them. By and large, on a daily basis, it tends to be white malmal. And basically, I think it's to protect you from the sun. And but if they go calling, they'll be very crisp white ones. And I think the more the higher your status, the crisper the turban, and the whiter the white on it. Ceremonial occasions, yes, it's again the same sort of thing. They tend to be these banis that the Rajput men will wear, and georgettes and that sort of thing. And again, in UP, as you move sort of towards the east, you'll find people, there's more of the Banarsi culture steps in. Like my mother-in-law is from eastern Uttar Pradesh, and on her side, they tend to be these gulabi pagdis is what they call them, which are Banarsi organzas that they wear at ceremonial occasions. So it is something that we do find spread around, but it's becoming more and more ceremonial and auspicious occasions rather than on a daily basis, unlike Rajasthan, where you'll see it all the time.
Right.
Or Punjab, for that matter, my home state, where
Right.
you'll see it more often.
And I find the way of tying the turban in Patiala really sexy. I think that's the sexiest
Oh, you have
in
no
entire
idea
Punjab.
how much care they take over those turbans in Patiala. You have no idea. It's
Yeah.
like a religion.
I think it's a matter of pride, as Anu, as you're highlighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole culture of turban is a matter of pride
Yeah.
in who you are and where you
True.
come from,
Very
which
true.
reflects in how people live their lives.
Right. Fascinating. Okay, so day 3, we drive from Delhi to Johar. We'll have lunch at Johar by Dera Mandava. Early evening, feed the cow at the farm, learn how to milk a cow, or just witness the activities of the farm, which is equally joyful. Enjoy a relaxed evening by the pool over drinks and soak in the surroundings as the night falls, followed by uh, dinner. My question to you, Smriti, Smriti, tell us more about these farm activities offered at Johar. Question number 1. And do you believe these farm activities have the potential to be transformative experiences?
Uh, okay, so number one, the farm activities, I guess, because we have to put them across in that way to our agents, FTOs, and clients in that fashion. But primarily, the kind of environment and the space that we have, they are not designed to be um, activities. They are actually ongoing daily activities which one can participate and partake in. So it is not something, and also I'll tell you why. I mean, this is something that we debated internally a lot. That why should we center an experience around camels? If our values are and ethos are that we are trying to build the model and this is how life is here, and people please come and become a part of this and experience this, and the way it is, and this is how we live, and it is not something which is being designed for you. um, and then the whole experience around camels was that why would we do that, and then we came up to a point that if we don't experience it in that way, how will we get the essence of it? So in that way, this is how we design most of our experiences, uh, is around that time of the year, that time of the day, and what goes on and around here, whether it is related to our cattle, whether related to camel experiences, whether it is related to any outdoor activities, dinners, or any that sort of a thing. Agar aaj Sharad Purnima hai ya koi Purnima hai, so we can do a nice full moon night experience instead of eating in a regular dining space. And it just depends on what is the seasonal aspect, what is going on in terms of the farm activity. Are we sowing, are we weeding, are we harvesting? So we every week, every now and then, we design and put them on based on what is going around, and then we share that with our guests that this is what is going around and at the farm this week, and these are the things that you could do. Yes, milking or having an experience to see how the cattle is reared and kept and milked and all of that. That happens every single day. So hence that was a predictable one to put on paper. But there are plenty like that. I mean, so that is how we design the experiences. Of course, you can have a look at what we already have. I think we're aware of that. Your second question was, sorry, Kuntal, I lost the second question. First was tell us about the activities.
Yeah. So
Second,
do you believe these farm activities, becoming a part of the daily rhythm of what's going on in a farm? Do you think these activities have the potential to be transformative experiences?
yes, and I'm being honest. Yes and no. It actually depends on each individual and their stage and phase of life and their interests and passions. But yes, what I hope to do is definitely provide a model and a platform and an opportunity to share that. And because if that is also not there, then how will we know that it is going to have, or it may have any opinion, attitude, mindset change kind of a impact or influence. So it is something that we share with the same passion. But I would say, honestly speaking, it depends on people. But the idea is that the idea and the purpose is definitely that we want to be able to influence as many as people we can to understand and see that this is one way of living. This is not the only way of living. This is one way of living, and this is how you can live in tandem with your surroundings.
Right. Okay. You've been talking about colors while talking about turbans, and in Rajasthan, there's a certain color and design dedicated for every month or festival. I mean, it didn't happen this year, but in 2018 and 19, during the monsoon, I had led a Bridge the Knowledge Gap study tours of Rajasthan, and realized that in monsoon in Rajasthan, I was told it's the color is the color. You see the colors of the rainbows, and the green is the dominating color for monsoon. And also the month of Chaitra in Rajasthan, March and April, is all about orange and golden. Tell us more about this season and interplay of colors in Rajasthan.
मतलब आप उसमें इतने, as it says, it's so much in your blood and your culture and your life that you are actually like लहरिया. What you're talking about is monsoon में वो लहरिया पहनते हैं. तो वो लहरिया literally means the layers and the ripples of water, which can be in various colors and forms. And of course, if you go by, like you said, Chaitra, it's around spring after Basant Panchami onwards. They wear a lot of yellow and oranges, and it is in sync with the changing seasons, the changing part of the nature, how it functions, and it translates not only in the colors and what you wear and seasons. It is all your food, it's how you live every day that changes based on seasons. And of course, clothing is one of the ways how it's reflected. It's symbolic. And the major seasons, one is Leheria, one is spring. Then at some point, depending on around, just example, they will play from Holi up till Gangor. Gangor is a very, very big festival in Rajasthan, which happens about 10 days after Holi, 10, 12 days after Holi. So it's quite interesting that how they keep playing Holi in some parts of Rajasthan through them, because they're almost done with their harvest. And it's something which they're celebrating. And a lot of these festivals are associated to harvest also and change in seasons also. And it's something that is symbolic and very fascinating, because it is embedded in your head that this is the season has changed, and this is how we adapt to the season and the weather and the place. So our food changes, our clothing changes, the way we live change. So it's very fascinating how it's reflected through our lives.
Right. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's now we have fashion pundits telling us about that. Okay, blue is the dominant color for 2020.
Seasonal color.
A seasonal color. But now, but then the people of Rajasthan have been doing it for centuries. So we have 2 nights at Johad by Mandava. Again, hands-on activities of the farm, whatever is going on, and as she mentioned, lunch, and later in the afternoon, choose a camel buggy to the dunes for evening sundowner, traditional folk songs, part of it, back to the hotel, and dinner overnight at Johad by Mandava. This is the camel buggy That's how clients go, Smriti, to the dunes?
Yes, that's actually my great grandfather's camel buggy, one in the second last from there.
Right.
Yeah, they can choose to walk, they can choose to go in the buggy, they can choose to walk their own camel. It just is, it's fairly fluid like that.
Right. Fascinating. Uh, Smriti, let's spend some time talking about the social aspirations of rural Rajasthan. I mean, we have not just rural Rajasthan. This is something that I've noticed almost all over India, including Assam. Uh, is the rural Rajasthan struggling with social aspirations that don't match the economic realities?
Um, See, technology's got the better. It's a it's a myth that technology is not reached rural Rajasthan. Technology is reached everywhere. Um, if the way our lives in urban India have changed, it's not only rural. I would say even urban India, like how if you look at, I think most of us, a lot of us have seen the urban Indian uh, life in the 90s and the 80s. Um, you know, 70s, how it was, the urban life also, it has changed because of technology. So accessibility to technology, whether it is automobiles, whether it is telephones, whether it is communication, whether it is access to any information at the drop of a button. And so that has happened everywhere. And hence it has also happened in rural India, across the country. Um, So that is the same. Now, the question is about social change.
And
Yes, that has
aspirations.
been met. Aspirations तो है, पर एक interesting balance है in many situations which I see. In some situations, I would say regression भी है. In it's okay if a woman takes her own bullock cart and goes somewhere, but it's not okay if a woman decides to drive. So वो regression है. I mean, it has to, in some ways, in some sense. So वो social aspirations of yes, itna chalan hai, this is what is happening, fancy cars, this, that, blah, blah. But yet, trust me, I have experienced this firsthand. They are still way smarter than in understanding many things that we think from urban India that we do better. And we try and tell them that aap apni zindagi aise jiyo, this is better, that is better. It's the choice that they have made
Right.
because of the various options and choices that are available to them. Some choose not to, and as Anu was saying, that culture of wearing turban is dying fast in her part of the world. But that is the case everywhere. Yes, Rajasthan is slow in that process, but it's not that it's not happening there. I think in another, you won't see camels. You will only end up seeing them in few places or in a camel farm, which is very sad. And hence there is this urgent need to be able to create these models and build these understandings and work with communities that, being modern in your thinking doesn't mean that you adapt everything which may or may not work for you. And it's a very independent choice. Whether it's related to children, caste, women, those things need to be worked on in a different way and not in a regressive way. So it's a whole community effort. There's a whole attitude change. Yes, there is. But I would still say that there is a lot of hope and a lot of understanding which lacks in the urban areas that we find in rural India.
Right. Anu, what are your observations on the social aspirations versus economic realities of rural Uttar Pradesh?
I think where we are struggling is, I agree with Smriti that there's a lot of, we've kept pace in terms of technology, we've kept pace in terms of access to material goods. But what we haven't been able to do is to create employment opportunities for our people here. So there is that mismatch where, yeah, that is a bit of a struggle here. So people want a lot more, clearly.
Yeah.
but there aren't enough avenues. So most of the young have to migrate out to the cities. We have a huge contingent that ends up going to Surat, working in the mills there, Gujarat, working in Ahmedabad, Delhi. I believe almost every halwai is from our parts of the world.
Wow.
Which, yeah, which is sort of disrupts the social fabric, because when these young boys come back, they have been exposed to certain things that disconnects them somehow from the rural scenario, from the community structures that hold everything in place. These are structures that bind. I know they can be regressive at times, but they're also very supportive. And we saw that when the lockdowns happened, where the
Absolutely.
communities just banded together. We were all there. You know, I'm not just talking about us as providing largesse. It's about the whole rural communities being able to support each other, be there for each other. And people didn't starve, people didn't struggle the way they did in urban centers.
Absolutely. I mean, Anu, if you, the two examples I would like to give you here, for example, in this remote district in Manipur, they were actually, the village came together to build a quarantine center for the boys coming back from the big cities, boys and girls. And once the boys and girls were cured, I mean, they completed quarantine and they were like corona negative or whatever. They just went back to farming and weaving, which
Yeah.
was an entire community band together to kind of help them, which is like very, very, very interesting for me. Yeah,
I think
please.
where we are struggling here, Kuntal, is also that there is some degree of agrarian distress, which does need to be addressed and looked into, because farm holdings are reducing with each successive generation.
Right.
So there is an imperative for, and it doesn't, you know, as Smriti again said, it doesn't necessarily need to be that you have to have a road, you have to have an industry for a place to be developed. There are several models that can be adapted where we could create employment opportunities for our young here, which would help address their aspirations, would help address their desire to you know, do things that they see all the time, that this visual media that is coming their way.
Right.
It just would help for them to meet those.
Fantastic.
Can I add to what Anu said? Anu, I have to share this with you and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very dear friend in Bombay, and he's in the ad world. And he says कि ना हर इंसान का एक सपना है कि मेरी जब भी थोड़ी सी प्रोग्रेस हुए मैं 10 इंच बड़ा घर ले लूं, जब भी थोड़ी सी प्रोग्रेस हुए मैं 10 इंच बड़ा घर ले लूं. Like वो 10 इंच की जिंदगी पूरी निकल जाती है. It's also the idea of progress. It's also the idea of a good life, which in the youth is needs to be explained, and then they should make their choices. मतलब हम शहरों में पागलों की तरह 10 इंच के लिए भाग रहे हैं, इसका मतलब नहीं कि वो सही है और आप भी भागो उसके लिए. I mean, it's really it really boils down to that, and how you know, even Kalam, APJ Kalam used to say कि अगर आप youths का अपने mindset उनको strength दे दी और फिर उनको options दे दी to make their choices, that is enough. That is all that you need to do. So I also feel that that is an extremely important point, that you know, if in whichever way that we can work on, or you know, together should be really worked on. It's वो 10 इंच की दौड़ में नहीं फंस जाए.
Thank you, Smriti. Thank you for adding to what Anu said. Day 5 from Chohat by Dera Mandava, we go to Samod Palace via Navalgarh. Sightseeing of Navalgarh, the painted Havelis of Navalgarh, just 30 minutes from Chohat by Dera Mandava. Lunch at Rup Nivas Koti. Continue to Samod Palace. Remainder of your day at leisure. Dinner overnight Samod Palace. I would like to come to Manoj Pamneja. Manoj is the head of our incentive team. You know Samod Palace like no other. You know it the best in the organization. In your opinion, and given your first-hand experience, why should Samod Palace be included in a rural Rajasthan life?
Well, I don't know if I would know the best in the company, Kuntal, but I'll try my best. Samod Palace in the rural itinerary. Okay, when you mention rural itinerary, sustainable itinerary, so the client is expecting to stay at some beautiful manors, houses, living with the family, learning about their, how they live, what they do, and, be a part of the family. They will never expect that they will actually stay in a real palace or a castle with over 40 odd rooms, 250 plus history, some sheesh mahals and darbar halls, which, have been painted 200, 300 years ago and still retain their original charm. So this is something would be, comparable to a luxurious stay of the whole itinerary. So that's why I think Samod Palace should be a part of the itinerary, because they would be experiencing everything local. And what more local is there than original 250-year-old Indian historical palace, castle, house, whatever you may want to call it.
Right. And tell us one story you remember from your many encounters with Samod and Samod Palace. Manoj? Manoj, are you there? I lost it. Saurabh? Saurabh? Yeah. I think
Hello? Kuntal, can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay, sorry. We talked about the electricity just went off, so I lost
I
connection.
thought I lost my internet.
I'm back on the mobile.
Yeah, okay. So tell us that one story you remember from your many encounters with Samod and Samod Palace.
Oh, so many. But one of the ones that is very fresh in my mind is actually one of the very, not the very first one, but I think very early visits to Samod. When I was traveling with the group, a French group, an incentive of about, I think, 20, 25 rooms, 40 odd people. And this was supposed to be, the gala night, the last stay of the itinerary. So we've done Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, stayed in, 4-star hotels. And this was supposed to be the highlight. We were staying at the bar. And this was, I think, early 2000s when there was still actually proper tents only. So we left Jaipur, and before we get to Samod, there's a thunderstorm and heavy rains. And as it was actual tents, most of the tents were flooded by the time we got there, and some were actually uprooted. So when we reached there and the group sees the state of the tents, they're kind of disappointed and sad, because this was supposed to be the highlight. We had really told them this is going to be your best night. You're going to dress up in Indian clothes and stuff like that. And because we were going to stay at the Bagh and have dinner at the palace. And there was nothing that can be done. And we checked with Palace, and Palace was sold out, which, was even more sad news for the guests. At that time, we didn't have mobile, so there's only 1 or 2 lines at the Bagh at that time. So we're trying to do, see what can be done in Delhi or Jaipur. And out of the Blue, Samut Palace manager calls us and says, okay, the good news is one of the other groups which was supposed to stay at the palace is now is not coming because they're stuck because of the rain. And they managed to clear the rooms at the palace. So when I told the group this news, all French, some of them could hardly speak English, but just their expressions that they were going to actually spend the night. And when we reached the palace and they checked in, it was just amazing for them, because they were just supposed to go and have a dinner there in their Indian attire, but they ended up spending the night and they were just over the moon, and they couldn't stop thanking the manager.
Right.
It was just a wonderful experience for them. They loved it.
Right. And tell us that one experience in Samut Palace which you would suggest to FITs and small groups, something which is a must do. I know you deal with incentives, but I'm sure.
Well, I've done a couple of walking tour okays there, compared to what you will see in other places in other villages. It's nothing compared to that, but it's still just a small road in the village where people just walk around and they see the daily life of the local people. You see a halwai, you see a bangle guy, you see a tailor, a utensil shop. So that's just, for the people who have just started the itinerary or who are staying at the palace and they just walk out and they see this, it's amazing for them. And of course, after that, the lunch at the farmer's house, that is something a must do in the village. Actually, the farmer's house, who is actually one of the staff, it's his family house. And you mingle with the family, play with the kids, see the kitchen, because the family is cooking. It's not the hotel staff or the hotel chef. So family kitchen, family cooking for you and eating in earthen pots and stuff. That is one experience that even the small groups that we've done, they've loved it. It's
right, the farmer's lunch.
Yeah, the farmer's lunch and the family interaction, the kids. It's just something that everybody loves.
Right. Thank you, Manoj, for an insight to this unique experience. Yeah, thank you. Day 6, day trip to Jaipur from Samut Palace. Visit the city palace and the Royal Observatory. Lunch and direct payment, Amber Fort in the afternoon. Then you return to Samut Palace in the evening. Overnight, Samut Palace. Here is another fascinating thing about rural Rajasthan, which is it is estimated that more than 80% rural families of Rajasthan keep livestock in their households. 80%. Contribution of animal husbandry sector to the GDP of Rajasthan is estimated to be around 11%. About 35% of income of small and marginal farmers comes from dairy and animal husbandry. In arid areas, the contribution may be as high as 50%, which is staggering. Smriti, I would like to come to you. Tell us more about how animal husbandry continues to be one of the chief sources of livelihood in rural Rajasthan.
Well, in this case, there are many aspects to it. One of the aspects which I would like to highlight, which a lot of people don't know, is that actually Rajasthan is one of the top suppliers of the livestock across the country. And in Western Rajasthan, the mutton, the meat, which goes across the country from there, and it's great because of the terrain, what they eat, what they browse on. They walk for kilometers, hence their muscle mass is way higher. And like for example, they graze on more than 25 to 30 different species, and hence the quality of the livestock is great. So animal husbandry is not only the whole livestock is the animal system and the ecosystem is not only just for the milk, and but is also for livestock. We have been primarily across the country, I think, a milk drinking nation traditionally, and that has been part of our lives. Uh, in Rajasthan, we have more cow milk culture instead of buffaloes, and there are reasons for that. Is because there are certain local breeds which are like Tharparkers and different breeds which thrive or which can very easily survive and take the extreme heat and extreme winter and different harsh conditions and browse on the food which is available here, and still and of course I believe the popularity in A2 milk right now is being rediscovered, and that is something that traditionally was part of our lives. So yeah, so it's in fact there are some people who've actually come and done some research in Western Rajasthan on livestock economy, and it's very interesting how the uh, let's say like it's like a stock exchange. The rate changes every day, and these people who also the Raika, the Rebaris, and even other farmers and peoples and locals in Western Rajasthan, they rely more on livestock than farming, and farming is only done for their own consumption. And as you move towards North and East Rajasthan, the story changes a little. And South Rajasthan also traditionally food has been grown for their own consumption, and the whole animal husbandry takes over and plays a very important role in the sustainability of the whole system.
Anu, would you like to share the UP story here about rearing animals and livelihood?
In UP, Kuntil, it's been mainly buffalo and the cow.
Right.
That you'll see, especially in these western Uttar Pradesh parts. It's really added substantially to the sort of well-being of the families, because it's mainly the women who've been who do the tending to the livestock and also pocketing the proceeds in a way. So in a way, I would almost say it's like a women's empowerment thing, where young brides, one of the things that they are either bringing in their dowry, or one of the first things that they manage to convince their in-laws' families is to get them a buffalo, which they then rear and they sell the milk, and that's the money they use for their own extras, and also to educate the children. You're seeing more and more children being educated, more and more girls being educated, simply because the women have greater access to, a control over certain amount of finances, which is primarily because of the rearing of livestock. And we've got a number of chiller plants that have come up in these parts, where the milk is collected door to door. There's collection units that transport it then to the major urban centers. So in that sense, yes, it's been a valuable addition to the farm life here, and especially to the women's status and their economic well-being.
Fascinating, because the Maldhari community of the Kutch region and Gujarat, when I went there, I discovered that when they get married, they kind of send 7 buffaloes with the bride as dowry, and they take care of it, and they're supposed to get all the money. That's the kind of arrangement. And what you say completely put things in perspective, because I mean, that's a great way of empowering women, where they have access to finance because of animal husbandry. Fascinating.
Unfortunately, that's not the only dowry they demand, but that's another story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so day 7, we drive from Samud Palace to Bharatpur. En route, we'll visit the Chand Bauri, check in, lunch, and then visit the Bharatpur bird sanctuary in the afternoon. Dinner and overnight at the Chandramal Haveli. Coming to the panchayat system of rural governance, it's really critical in our village, in rural Rajasthan, or anywhere in rural India. And there are some remarkable women who have done exceptionally well in panchayats and have contributed to the development of the villages through innovative ideas and projects. Smriti, can you share the story of one such remarkable woman you know and the kind of change that she has brought about in a village?
Well, I don't know anyone in particular, but I know lots of other such examples of women who have done phenomenal uh, jobs with communities, not necessarily as a sarpanch or but in different forms. Um, in fact, I have a very dear friend who works for an organization called Hunger Project, whose they work with women in panchayats and help them understand and use, not just become pawns in the panchayat, not become pawns in the panchayat and just be someone, let someone else run and do their job, but they to empower them and make them understand the contribution and and the contribution that they can make towards their community and their village. The kind of works that they've done, like for example, there's this one area that I knew where they have already begun working on reviving natural water conservation or lake systems in Rajasthan and a lot of part of Gujarat. They have these natural pastoral lands, grazing lands, and water systems and water conservation in pond and lake systems. They call beads, they call johars, they call jodas. There are various different words and how they describe that. So they've been working on reviving for the past 30, 40, 50 years, the whole pond and lake systems and the grazing lands culture has completely gone. So they're working on reviving those systems to be able to ensure that it's not just this generation or the next two generations, the three generations should have enough drinking good water.
Fascinating.
So that's a
Fascinating. And Anu, you know anybody who's a remarkable woman in rural UP who has been a harbinger of change?
I would say the same as Smriti. I mean, I don't know anyone in particular, but I do know several women who are doing some excellent work. 20 years ago, when I moved here, we had this whole reservation thing started where certain seats were reserved for women. And invariably, you'd find that when you went for these meetings, the husband would be chairing that meeting and the woman would be sitting on the wife would be sitting on the elected representative in a way, would be sitting on the side and, with a wail, a big ghungat and barely ever speaking. And it's been wonderful to see the change where these women are becoming more assertive and they're actually getting work done, unlike and the posters have changed now. Earlier you would have the man's the election posters would have this huge big picture of the man, and then in the corner you would have the poor woman who was actually seeking election. It's reversed, so that's a good sign. And the thing that I've noticed about these, whenever these women are elected to positions of some influence or power, is that they help facilitate other women's work. Most especially the ANMs, the auxiliary nurses around these parts, who really have to battle these entrenched traditions where people won't allow them access. Vaccination is an issue, the polio eradication program, infant and maternal death rates are extremely high. And once there is an elected woman in charge, she helps facilitate the work of these ANMs and all. And I've seen that improvement all around me. So no one in particular, but lots of wonderful women doing amazing work.
Right. Thank you so much. Day 8 from Bharatpur. We drive to Fatehpur Sikri, the abandoned capital of the Mughals and a UNESCO World Hillside, and plus continue to Agra, visit the Red Fort and the Taj Mahal, and have lunch in Agra, and later drive to Chambal Safari Lodge. That's day 8 for us. Anu, tell us about this cycle superhighway and how guests at the Chambal Safari Lodge can make use of it. I saw some pictures. It's like really fascinating.
It's been a great it's been a lovely project that we got involved with. About 2017 is when it was inaugurated, and fortunately the government took a great interest in it then. So it's about 207 kilometers. Starts from behind the Taj Mahal, loops around these very interesting little sites, Raja Bhoj ki Haveli and places like that. Comes down to us, goes past the Bateshwar temples, lots of rural communities and goes to the National Chambal Sanctuary and ends at the Lion Safari project in Etawah. The social aspect of it has been really great in that it's connected 92 villages that had no road access earlier. So you find that the local communities are using it a lot. You see these young girls going for tuition classes or going cycling down for their school where, you know, earlier the parents wouldn't allow them to. In terms of the guests, it's we have a few bicycles that are kept on the property. So as soon as you step out of the property, you can just ride into the rural countryside. You can go to Bateshwar, which is, you know, about 15 kilometers, or down to Chambal. So these are shorter trips that you can do. And we've also done a few longer experiences in like a 2-day trip where people ride in from Agra, reach us, and then the next day they do another 90 odd kilometers to go towards Etawah. So it's a mix of things. And we've, because I think cycling is also picking up, there's a lot of interest in cycling now. So you do find people, expat community based out of Delhi, they will drive down, bring their bicycles. The children will have their bicycles with them. And on an average, they'll do 20, 30 odd kilometers in a day. And it's a great way to see the countryside. It's a slower pace. You take in a lot more. And there are great many more exchanges with the local communities because people take an interest when you're riding out on a bicycle and you stop and you can talk to people. And I think it makes for a far more relaxed way of exploring the countryside or even any space that you're in.
Brilliant. Day 9 at the Chambal Safari Lodge, morning at leisure, alfresco lunch in the garden, late afternoon guided nature walk around the lodge grounds and the countryside. Checklist, Chambal Safari is a checklist of over 200 species and trained naturalists on hand. Easy paced activity to get a closer look in the rural landscape and community. Alternatively, one can choose to go on a gentle bicycle ride on the bicycle track that Anu just talked about. The lodge is around 5 bicycles. Dinner overnight at Chambal Safari Lodge. This is the garden where you have lunch. It's very relaxed atmosphere actually. Anu, tell us about the skimmer. It is, I mean, the highlight of a Chambal River experience, which is also its only breathing ground.
Yeah, it's one of the big draws. It used to be, I mean, it had a very large spread, and until the 70s, I believe it was quite regularly spotted even in the Okhla Barrage area.
Right.
Habitat loss has been on the brink of extinction, but fortunately in Chambal we have large nesting colonies. And the good thing is that with the interest that has been growing around it, especially after the bird festival that we had, and so BirdLife International got involved along with BNHS for a project looking into skimmer populations. We've also managed to identify a nesting site in Orissa where they've been found, and one in Allahabad, which was quite a surprise to people because, you know, that was the last thing. Initially, we thought it was just a vagrant population that was mixed in with the gulls at Sangam, but apparently there is a nesting site there, and the research work is ongoing. It's a remarkable bird in that it's stunning colors, especially with that scarlet yellow beak that it has. And the lower mandible is much longer. So the reason it's called a skimmer is because it skims the calm water with that lower mandible, trying to take in whichever small fish it can. And that's how it feeds. And they tend to fly in formation, which makes for great photographic opportunities. And then come and sit down almost like a school with a tutor in front and everybody facing backwards, sitting down. So quite a sight.
It's a fascinating sight, especially when it skims through the water.
Yes,
it's a fascinating sight, which we are all going to see on when you go on a river safari when we're there. Yeah. Okay, so Chambal Safari Lodge breakfast, morning exclusive river safari in the National Chambal Sanctuary. Lunch at the lodge and mid-afternoon visit to Holipura Heritage Village. And then the evening aarti at Bateshwar. Dinner and the evening walk looking for resident civet cat, jungle cat, jackals and owls. My question to you, Anu, will be give our audience an idea about the river safari of the National Chambal Sanctuary, how it unfolds when for guests staying with Chambal Safari Lodge. That's question number one. I have another question for you, two more questions for you, but let's start with how the river safari on the National Chambal Sanctuary unfolds.
Well, typically the time varies according to the time of the year, because unlike the tiger parks, we don't need to be there ridiculously early. We wait till the sun is up in the winter months. So we would probably leave the lodge around 8, accompanied by one of the resident naturalists. The river is about 5 kilometers as the crow flies, but the route we take is about 22 kilometers through the countryside along the bicycle highway. You drive through the ravines. It's it's a stunning landscape. It's nothing quite prepares you for it, and you suddenly come onto this beautiful river, the blue contrasting beautifully with the dull browns all around. We have our boats stationed there. We've done the carrying capacity study along with the forest department, so we're allowed to have 4 boats there, but we keep only 3 so as not to be accused of monopolizing that spot. It's an exclusive safari, so guests get into this boat and then accompanied by the boatman and the lodge naturalist, they'll do about a 2 to 3 hour boat ride where they'll get to see the gharials, the marsh crocodiles, Gangetic river dolphins, if you're lucky, the Gangetic river dolphins. There's 8 species of turtles, almost 330 species of birds. And we do very well for photography tours because it's a very calm river. And these are flat bottom boats, so we can have the tripods on there and you can get quite close to the wildlife without disturbing them. And even if people aren't interested in wildlife or nature, it's just the idea that, you are in the heart of India, in the middle of a river where there's not a soul in sight. You have this stunning landscape, you have this expanse of blue, and you have the ravines rising up. It's just truly magical. I am, of course, biased. I will put that disclaimer in, but it is a truly magical experience.
Yeah, I mean, especially we'll talk about the Champal ravines, which is really mystical and magical later on. Question number 2 would be the walk in Holipura village. Holipura village is again a very, very interesting village. Again, introduce our audience to the sights, smells, and sounds of Holipura village when they go for a walk here.
Holipura was again one of those projects that we took on where we worked with the government and had it declared a heritage village. It dates from, the first Havelis date from about the 16th century. And it's a Chaturvedi village where these Chaturvedis initially used to, when I first started working with them, they claimed to be a particular branch of the Brahmins that claimed descent from Alexander's Greek armies. Now that narrative has changed and they now would rather be part of the greater Hindu fold without having any Greek antecedents. But nonetheless, they have some very unique characteristics and traditions that mark them out as distinct from other Brahminical orders. So the village walk basically involves us driving down again. It's about 15 minutes from us. And then a member of the local community takes over. And they will walk you through the village, going into some of the grand Havelis. A lot of them are now abandoned. We're just caretakers there. They were built over these many years because the Chaturvedis were able to get very good positions, first in the Mughal courts and then later as administrators with the British. So these grand Havelis, a bit like Shekhawati, but not as colorful, I would say. But it's also a microcosm of rural Uttar Pradesh village life because it's a well laid out small village where you have all the caste groups living in a sort of a symbiotic relationship. So you have the smaller, simpler homes of the potters community, the iron workers, etc. And we are very careful in not allowing this to turn into a voyeuristic experience in that there are no particular homes that we will enter. We just wander about, we will point out some of the great architectural features, talk about how rural life unfolds on a daily basis. There'll be interactions with the people that you'll meet there. And a lot of times we find that The little children will come looking for the guests, and they will draw them in and ask them to come and visit their houses. And their mothers will be standing there in the doorway shyly with their heads covered and peeping through and inviting you in and want to show you around their beautiful little kitchens, with the mud lipai and all.
Interesting. And this Yamuna, this Aarti at Bateshwar, tell us more. It's a private Aarti, if I'm not wrong, because suddenly, all clients are surprised. They are like, they get really surprised when they realize that it's a private Aarti and it's just for them.
That's true. It's because again, Bateshwar is it's like a cross between Varanasi and Pushkar, but much smaller, much simpler. These pearly white little shrines dotted along crescent bend of the Yamuna, and very simple shrines built over centuries by villagers, by merchants, kings, queens, the local nobility, and each of those temples has a little arti ceremony in them. Some are functioning, some are not functioning. And so what we do, and it's also very inclusive. These are the Gosains who control these temples. So they're quite happy to have non-Hindus not only participate in an arti, but also to enter the sanctum. So we tend to go to one of those where we walk through, again, along the ghats, stopping at some of the main temples. 2 have been restored by INTAC. So you have these beautiful frescoes that have come to life again, dating from the 17th century. And a very interesting mix, because you have angels mixing in with Indian deities. So clearly there are influences at play here that none of us quite understand. Some of the temples actually look like Islamic tombs. So again, a very interesting topic of discussion with INTAC on that and with the guests. And then you end up in one of those shrines where the ceremony is conducted just for the guests, because there's so many of them, we can afford to do something like that. And also it makes it for a more intimate experience where, and again, you're not forced to do anything, you're not expected to do anything, you just participate, you just become part of the whole experience. Is about you finding that connection that allows you to understand how this particular ceremony works, and there's nothing transactional about it. So which makes it, I think, which is what I really feel is what makes it
I mean,
special.
that's what I think clients have really given very good feedback about this Aarti, where they're part of this whole ceremony. Very, very interesting. Very quickly, Anu, Bateshwar Fair, despite its illustrious history, is still off the tourist radar. I mean, tell us more about the Bateshwar Fair and why it is a wonderful experience.
I think because it's off the tourist map.
Yeah.
It's because it is just such an authentic experience. It's a trading fair. It's busy. It's buzzing. There's traders coming from far and wide. It starts with cattle, goes on to horses, which peaks on the day of Diwali, and then camels, and finally donkeys, which I personally find the cutest. And you can wander through this without anybody coming up and disturbing you or wanting to sell you anything or do anything. You can actually see, and you have traders coming from. We have one particular trader who comes from Kochi every year, and he comes and stays with us because he flies in. And we have traders coming from Punjab, from Orissa, and the livestock comes from everywhere. So it's a very, again, I mean, it's a much used term, but it is interesting. It is just so insightful to see how this trade goes on, how people still buy and sell livestock, which is, and it doesn't have to involve the tourist in any way. They are simply passing through in a way. So that makes it very interesting.
Yeah, where tourists are just passing through it, it's not made up for them. That's very, very interesting point. From the audience, just to let you know, Bateshwar Fair has a trading part to it and a religious part to it. Please get in touch with Anu if you want more information on this. This is this is something that we should definitely promote. And before you pose this question in the Q&A section, this is for the audience. A day trip ex Agra or en route visit to the Bateshwar Fair is highly not recommended. It's not recommended. we as an organization and our guides, escorts do not enjoy the access that Sambal Safari Lodge have, and clients may end up being highly inconvenienced if they're taken on a day trip ex-Agra or en route give. For example, because of vehicular restrictions, just one small example. So clients should say Chambal Safari Lodge and enjoy the Bateshwar fair. Remember, it's a very authentic fair where you're just passing through it. It's not made up for tourists. Day 11, Chambal Safari Lodge to Delhi, breakfast, checkout, and lunch at Kila Pratap, which is 45 minutes for Sambal Safari Lodge. Drive to Delhi, check in into your Aerocity Hotel, dinner, and overnight. Anu, tell us about Kila Pratap. Was a very, very interesting project which you have. What stages are at it, and what does the lunch at Kila Pratap entail?
Uh, Kila, Kila Pratap is again one of those little hidden gems. This is a lot in the Yamuna ravines. These are series of gullies that were all along the Yamuna, basically taxing the movement across the river. And this particular one is from, starts, the first buildings are from the 13th century onwards, the Chauhan Rajputs. It fell into disrepair, and we started working on it about 5 years ago. It's, again, it's just the landscape, it's the way it's situated, how well it fits into it, and you would barely expect to see it. The drive is again through the ravines of the Yamuna. You come onto this, suddenly it bursts into view, and it's spread out over a very large area on high up in the ravines, from where you get these stunning views of the Yamuna flowing by and the small village of Pratapner. And it's also part of the bicycle highway, so it's a lovely track and a road to get to it. The lunch basically entails a little guided tour. There's a lot of conservation work that has gone on here. We've used traditional techniques to try and, we've been working with conservation architects and historians including INTAC and the Sushant School of Architecture. So the lunch is basically a very romantic little setting where in the middle of nowhere, in the ravines, with the river flowing by, stepping back a few centuries, and just a quiet little spot to take it all in, and something to I think that's unusual about the kind of itinerary that we're on here. So it's just that little something that is so remote, so inaccessible in a way, but yet so charming.
And yet it's not really far away from the Yamuna Expressway, from where our clients can slip
that's
in
the
and
wonderful
just...
thing. That's the wonderful thing. It takes about 20 minutes from there to get onto the the Lucknow Expressway and then the Yamuna Expressway. So you're in Delhi within 4 hours from this spot, 4.5 hours. So it's great from that. And eventually, I think when the Lion Safari project in Etawah takes off, not as a safari project, but as a breeding center, where they're trying to revive these lion populations. And we have about 12 cubs there, which will progressively be released into the wild, into sort of a soft release to try and get them to adapt to living wild. It will become a nice little excursion as well from Kila Pratap to go on to there.
Right. And Anu, I just wanted to ask you this question about the Chambal ravines, the once notorious Chambal ravines, the Pihar, jisko bolte hain. And I always, whenever I think of Chambal, I always think of Pan Singh Tomar. And that particular dialogue, which is Bihar mein to bagi hote hai, decade milte hai parliament mein. I just love that dialogue. Whenever I think of ravines, I think of that dialogue of Pan Singh Tomar and that khad meat, which RP introduced me to, khad meat, which was actually, a recipe from the ravines of Chambal, where no fire could be lit without the fear of discovery by the police, and where rebellion against the system was the highest mark of honor once upon a time. Do you have any stories to share about the Chambal ravine? Something interesting? Somebody told me there's a temple of a particular, they said they call it a rebel of Chambal in one close to Chambal Safari Lodge.
There are actually there's quite a few, Kuntil. We have to be very honest. We have deliberately steered clear of dacoit-based tourism. As if I had $1 for every time somebody's called me up and said they would like to do a Sholay theme, something or the other, I'd be a millionaire a few times over. But it's something that we've always, see, people became dacoits because the system failed them, and in the initial years. And then in the later years, post the 1970s, it was more because there was a lot of caste-based violence, there was a lot of political patronage that led to this flourishing. And so to our minds, they are not role models, and it's not something that we particularly like to encourage or talk about. The Baghi that you are talking about was a different breed. And there are several stories associated with them. And we had a few doddering old men who would land up every now and then. And they were old family retainers in a way. And and they were all referred to as Dadda. And it was many years later that I realized that most of these Daddas were reformed dacoits. They're part and parcel of our landscape. And the dialogue that you're talking about from Pan Singh Tomar, it's one of RP's favorites, because every time a guest has asked him, so where are the dacoits? And without batting an eyelid, this man will look them straight in the eye and say, oh, in Parliament.
That is a fascinating film. Thank you so much, Aru, for this. And this is my last picture actually of today's presentation. The Persian wheel, the Ara Khatta, which is very much part of the water culture of rural Rajasthan, with some farmers still using it. It's a symbol of sustainable and carbon-free water use with a history which is at least 1200 years old. Amazing. Day 12, depart Delhi, transfer to the international airport for your onward flights. Thank you everyone for this insightful, all your insights. Let's take some questions. I think we can take some questions. Yes, it's almost 5 o'clock now, but we can take some quick questions with the permission of the panelists, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. Prateek Srivastav says, thanks, Priti. Totally agree that unfortunately the road accessibility and modernization has become a parameter of development wherein it should be the quality of life. Chandrasekhar wants to know the day-to-day life of the folk dancers who perform in hotels and resorts in rural areas like Mandawa, and how the new generation think about this occupation for their future.
Sustainable nahi hai, Kuntil. This form of or this way of trying to revive or give an environment of support to any artist. I don't think that is the ideal way to support them, and hence it's fragile. Yes, tourism has helped immensely in some ways, but it's also unfortunately altered it, modified it to a great degree. And that's something that I've experienced in some places, like even if you look at the puppet show, and unfortunately we are responsible for that as people who host guests and as people who invite guests into our country, into our homes, into our places, because it's the way we present them. The onus is on us and not really the artists. I mean, I would say that if you go anywhere across the world, if there is any live performance, no matter what is the level of it, there is a certain respect, there is a certain way they're dressed, and the way you present them, the way you give them time, shows that respect. If we don't respect them, which we don't in many, many ways, because the way we present them, they keep sitting in one corner of any hotel and wo Katputli show ho raha hai, wo Ravan Hatta baja raha hai. I'm speaking for Rajasthan largely. That is not how you should present art or any artists. in Jaipur at home, which my parents run. And it's one of the ways that it can be done, is that, we fixed a certain time that every day at 6:30, it is presented like a show. They're given an introduction. There is a background of that art form is presented to all the guests. If they would like to join, it's presented in terms of a sort of a platform or stage for them, and not just cut short. Like, for example, they enact a scene from the court of Shahjahan, where various people come and display their skills, a warrior or a serpent or a dancer, or even a fight between a street drummer. It's the way you present it. And that's where we have faltered. I mean, I would like to say that.
What is your take? What is your take on the Riff Festival in Jodhpur?
It's great. I think it's fantastic how, see, that is centered around music. That is centered around the art. The question here is of people performing in hotels and how we should present them. I think that idea and that point of view needs to change, even to the entire travel fraternity and people who receive guests in their homes or their hotels.
Right. Rashmi Gupta is asking, Anu, on the Holipura village walk, you mentioned about community person taking over and showing the village. Do they speak English? Agreeable
Yes.
English?
We have one particular person, Sanjay Chaturvedi. So he leads that group. Invariably, he's part of the, and also our naturalists or our lodge guides are on hand as well. But we prefer giving him the lead, and he does speak English. He manages to communicate.
Right. Pratik Shivasav is asking, which is the most interesting part of the Bhatteshwar fair, the trading part or the religious part?
It's entirely on guest interest because, as I said, nothing's arranged for the tourists, nothing is planned for them. So it is really, if they're interested in animals and seeing how the trading aspect of that works, then that's the time to come. If the interest is more in seeing the sadhu akhadas, because we have it starts just around Diwali, the horse fair and all. Then we have a lull for a few days, and then it is Kartik Purnima, where it's most auspicious time to take a dip. So all the shops come up, and the sadhu akhadas move in. So that's more like a village fair then, and the cartwheels and things like that. So it is entirely upon guest interest, and there is no date. I was reading, one of the questions was, is there a date where you can do both? No, there is no such date. You can do one or the other. You can't do both.
Right, and it all depends upon, and then also during the religious fair, you have that Aarti every evening going on at the Bhatteshwar fair, Bhatteshwar temples, if I'm not wrong. The grand
yes, you have the larger Aarti going on during the Bhatteshwar, those 21 odd days on the ghats of the river, which people can go and join in.
Okay, all right. There are some questions on logistics, like Ankita is asking Smriti, what are the activities that we can offer to guests? I will suggest, Ankita, please write to Smriti, send an email. She has a comprehensive document. She will send it to you, and you can just take it forward with her. Chandrasekhar again has a question to Anu, like, so how is the local transportation done? Please again send an email to Anu. She will give you all the answers. Vikas Solanki is asking, thanks for the talk on this session. Loss of cultural identity is one of the negative effects of tourism. You are taking some steps to protect in your rural tourism project. Do you sensitize the tourists about these on spot?
Well, I think we all do. When people come to small places like ours, or to Mandava, it is a person who is genuinely interested in understanding the culture rather than trying to change it. Of course, by us being here, just us leading the lives we are presenting an alternative lifestyle in an alternative way, which does impact the social fabric. But you do sensitize guests as to what is appropriate in terms of what they should be wearing, in terms of how their interactions should be. And there's always somebody on hand to guide that process. And as I said, again, the kind of person who makes the effort to come to these offbeat places tends to be a very well-traveled individual.
Yes, absolutely.
Who has a genuine interest and is seeking to enrich themselves and leave you enriched in the process. I mean, one of the joys I have from this, what I do, is the kind of people I meet every day, the kind of conversations I have around the fire. It's a learning experience, and it's learning both ways.
Yeah, I would like to add to what Anu's saying, Kuntil. I feel that there is a certain amount of attention and responsibility with partners like you also need to do, and whoever else you deal with also need to be done. Is that it's not a hotel environment that we have. It is something different and special. So those expectations or those understanding of what we have and what we are sharing is a way of life, or is a way of life, as Anuji just said. It's important that we do it at every stage. We do it when we are trying to profile the customer, whether this customer is well traveled, when whoever's interacting directly with them, the traveler, and telling them that, if this might be of your interest, and then you propose it, and then it comes to you, and vice versa, and there's a certain correspondence that happens within you guys, and then that is at a later stage you involve us. So of course, the onus is also on us that when we receive guests, we have to be able to sensitize them of the environment, the social fabric, the understanding, the way of life, and all of that. But it should be done from the beginning of the chain, is what I would propose.
I agree with that.
All of us need to understand that.
I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of it is about setting expectations as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is why I say that, that day trip ex-Agra to Bateshwar Fair is a bad idea. It was wonderful having all of you today. Manoj, Anu, Smriti, thank you so much for all your insightful insights, actually, if I may say. Thank you so much. It was lovely having you. It was lovely having the audience as well. Thank you for logging in. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy. And we must definitely do this webinar on food of rural India, because that's another fascinating topic, because it's so different from what we know. So thank you so much, everyone. Please fill in the poll before leaving the audience. It give us a feedback. It helps us get better. And thank you so much again, Manoj, Smriti, and Anu. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.